Welcome again to my channel, everyone. This is Trev from Trevessence, and today I'm going to share another experience with you all. And this time I'm going to tell you about the time when the person who was at the time my soon-to-be ex brought me flowers on the job. Yes, I know some of you might be saying flowers. Yes, he brought me flowers on the job, and I'm going to share with you that experience. So it was around November of 2015, and it had been 13 months since he had sent me that infamous email I told you about that said he didn't want the marriage anymore and he was never into the marriage. The antagonism had started at that time and it had continued. Now it was November, and I was at work one day, and surprisingly, I came around the corner and everybody was looking at me like strangely. And my coworkers were like, wow, Trev, you got flowers. And I was like, flowers? Who could have brought me flowers? I know nobody in my life at this time who would have brought me flowers. So I was perplexed. And I started asking, who brought these flowers? It was a beautiful bouquet of flowers, roses and lilies. It was beautiful. And I said, who brought these flowers? And somebody said, your husband, because at the time, people at the job knew that this person was my husband, but they didn't know what was going on between us. So I was like, in my mind, I'm confused because this is the person who has called me every name in the book and told me how much he never wanted the marriage. So for him to have brought me flowers at this time was very, very strange. So I gingerly walked up to the bouquet, and the first thing I noticed was that there was one of those cards on the bouquet, one of those cards that looks like a business card. And I looked on the card and I just stood there in shock. Why was I so shocked at what the card said? It's because the card was dated 7.5 years prior to that date. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to be wondering, what in the world? Why would the card be dated 7.5 years before? Well, it was November of 2015, and the card was dated February 14, 2008. And that is where the story began. Because around that time, remember I told you he had come into my home in January of 2008. In March, when he started to express all this love and affection for me and wanted me to get into a relationship with him, I had mentioned at the time that it was strange that at this time you are so in love and you knew you were in love with me for a very long time, and even before you got to the house and all of this. But Valentine's Day had passed by only a month prior, and you did not express any of this love that you're now expressing in March. And even a stalk of rose would have said something about how you were feeling. And he turned to me and said, when Valentine's Day came around, I had only $5 in my pocket, and I could use my $5 to buy rose for you. And when I expressed how I thought that sounded, he was like, oh, no, you're taking it wrong. That's not what I mean. And tried to explain that because we weren't in a relationship, he would not have spent his $5. And I started thinking, those of you who know the story, I started thinking, well, for all that I have done for you, even if there was no romantic connection to you having said Happy Valentine's Day and offered me a rose, it still would have meant something. Didn't have to have a romantic connection to it. Well, he said it was no big deal, and I just left it alone because it wasn't a big deal. I mean, you don't expect strangers to just give you flowers, right? But anyway, after he was asking me to marry him, it became significant to me. So that's why I had said it, that if you knew all along that you wanted to be with me, Valentine's Day would have been a good time to show it. And throughout the years of our marriage, he never tried to make up for that. And so at the time when he said he no longer wanted the marriage, and I started to reflect on everything that had happened in the marriage, I mentioned that right there was a significant red flag that told me exactly who he was, and I should have taken that incident as an indication of what was going to come. But I forgave him and I moved forward. And there were other instances that I also mentioned and referred to that were clear indications that this relationship was going nowhere. So imagine when I looked on the flowers and the card on the flowers says, Happy Valentine's Day, February 14, 2008. It brought home to me that I really was with a narcissist who was not apologetic for anything he had done. He had clearly thought about this because he knew that this would upset me greatly. And so when my friends at work came over to look at the flowers and to, congratulate me, say, wow, your husband is thinking about you and stuff, it was mixed feeling. I didn't know what to say to them because I did not at the time want them to know what was going on between me and my husband. But when one of my coworkers observed that the card had said February 14, 2008, she said, Trev, what the heck? Why does the card say February 2008? And I didn't know how to use a smile at that time to keep at the heartburn because it was so hurtful. And people were saying if it was me, I would throw it at him and I would do this and I would do that. People, I'm not a violent person. And that is not something that I would have done, throw stuff and carry on. No, that's not me. Certainly not me. So all I did was I picked up the bouquet. When I was leaving work, I picked it up and I brought it home with me. While everybody was looking at me and everybody was giving their opinions on how they would have mashed the glass and how they would have thrown it. I don't have time for all of that excitement. I picked it up. I brought it home. I clipped the flowers. I clipped the roses. And I stuck them in the garden outside. And I know he was looking at me and waiting for a confrontation that he never got. He never got the confrontation that he was waiting for. Sometimes, my friends, you have to not heed to the expectations of the devil. Because that right there was the plan to cut me to the core, to ensure that night we were going to have a fight, because he had brought it all the way to my job. And I still stay true to myself. I still stay true to my character. That nobody is going to drag me so low that I end up in a fist fight with somebody. Will not happen. Cannot happen. Guys, sometimes when you look around and you see what's happening, use your sense of discernment and take yourself out of the situation that might drag you out of character, because the devil is always at work. Thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters.